I've heard many stories about how some men were willing to give their beautiful wives to their bosses in order to get promoted and move up the career ladder. But I never understood it. My wife made me jealous very often, which is why my patience snapped at the most inopportune moment. Rayburn Watley sat and watched as his wife Jolene caused a scene on the community hall dance floor. Everyone was watching her. For 6 years he had dreaded this night might come. It was a lot to ask, of course. Jolene was a beautiful and vibrant woman. Their social life for the past 6 years had been limited to activities they could do together, or with their 2 boys. There were no parties, social gatherings, or mingling with friends or acquaintances. In fact, they had very few friends to socialize with. Rayburn had several reasons for insisting on this unusual arrangement. Firstly, he was extremely jealous, and Jolene attracted sleazy guys like a magnet. She was different from the girls back home in most ways. She knew how to groom herself and dress in the latest styles. She was educated and refined, yet still fun and playful. She was also a big flirt. That was where the problem lay. Why would a jealous man marry a woman who loved teasing and flirting with every man she met? Rayburn kept a tight leash on his wife. Their son Brian had just turned 5 and Tyson was almost 4. Taking care of them and the household was practically a full-time job. Rayburn tried to make things easier by taking everyone out as often as he could. He constantly brought gifts home for his wife, trinkets, flowers, and sweets. He had read in a magazine once that doing things like this would keep the little woman content. That was all he wanted. The dance tonight was a company event. Rayburn worked for a small family-owned construction firm. He worked diligently and kept to himself to avoid any issues. Yes, issues. That was the second reason for his peculiar insistence on not attending social gatherings. Rayburn was born and raised in Rockingham County, Virginia. Located in the far western part of the state, a half-mile more would put you in West Virginia. He had 3 brothers and a sister whom he missed dearly. His oldest brother, Thompson, was currently incarcerated. His sister, Nadine, and his 2 younger brothers, Grayson and Fletcher, still lived in the area. He hadn't seen any of them in over 6 years since he was forced to leave. Which brings us back to that second reason. Thompson had been imprisoned for beating a man so severely that the victim spent 2 months in the hospital. Rayburn, for a similar offense, was living and working 2 states away. Both Thompson and Rayburn were known for their hot tempers and fought fiercely when provoked. Once a fight started, neither felt pain or showed any mercy. The only way to stop them was by physically restraining them. Nadine shared the same fiery temperament but managed to control it slightly better. The 2 younger brothers, in contrast, were fairly ordinary and were often teased about having a different father, a joke their mother didn't appreciate. Rayburn's mother lived with Nadine, who was married to a long-haul truck driver. His infrequent visits were well understood by everyone. Authorities in both Virginia and West Virginia were waiting for Rayburn to return so they could arrest him. It didn't matter which state succeeded. Either way, he would end up like Thompson. Rayburn sat quietly at the back of the room watching his wife. Jolene was dancing and joking with all the men, both married and single. She was a flirt, thoroughly enjoying her free time. It had been far too long since she had attended parties and dances, and she was grateful that Rayburn had brought her, though upset that he didn't do it more often. She was making up for lost time and was in high spirits. It was a good night for Jolene. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere became more relaxed. Rayburn noticed that the guys were increasingly communicating with his wife, as if checking the boundaries with her. Most of the time, she managed to keep them in check while maintaining a good-natured demeanor. Most of the time. Benny Corbett, one of the co-owners of Brightbill Enterprises, was a loud, arrogant bore whom Rayburn disliked but tolerated because of his position as boss. It was important to earn a living and keep a low profile. As the evening drew to a close, Benny became more daring in his movements. During the slow dance, he put both hands on 2 of Jolene's watermelons. She did not resist and continued to dance, as if nothing had happened. Rayburn gripped the empty, long-necked bottle with all his might, but it didn't break. When Rayburn jumped up, he threw the bottle across the room right at his boss. Fortunately, it hit Cordetti's shoulder, not Jolene's. The blow was strong enough that the big man fell to one knee with horror on his face. Jolene turned around just in time to see her husband grab her partner and start pushing him across the room. He was going to punish the guy who dared to touch his wife, but he didn't have time. 3 men grabbed Rayburn and pulled them apart. "What the hell are you doing, you idiot?" shouted Cordetti, getting up from the floor. "If you touch my wife again, asshole, I'm going to hurt you very much. We were just dancing. We danced all night. A lot of guys danced with her. Yes, but none of them touched her watermelons while they were doing it. I had no problem with people dancing with her, but I won't let it go any further. You've crossed the line. You're crazy, Rayburn. You're crazy and drunk. And to top it all off, you're fired too. Come back tomorrow and pick up your last check. Kick that bum out." Jolene stood there, mouth agape. She had never seen her husband act this way before. She couldn't comprehend what had triggered this behavior. Until now, she had always seen him as a caring, loving husband. She had noticed he got slightly upset when she flirted, but nothing like this had ever happened in their 6 years together. Rayburn glanced at his wife, seeking some kind of support, but found none as he was escorted out. 10 minutes later, he was home. He paid the babysitter and sank onto the sofa. He wasn't drunk. He knew better and had paced his drinks throughout the night. He sat in the dark living room, the only light coming from the kitchen. He knew someone had given his wife a ride home when he heard the car door slam. He didn't bother looking to see who it was. Was it Benny? "Well, thanks for making tonight unforgettable. I have never been so humiliated. Thanks a lot, Rayburn." She tossed her wrap onto the chair and noticed her husband didn't respond. "Did you hear me? Are you awake, or are you so drunk you can't think straight?" "I'm fine. I see you made it home safely." "No thanks to you." Rayburn didn't want to argue with her. He was sitting there because he didn't want to be in bed when she got home, if she came back at all. "By the way, I gave you your job back. You start work tomorrow as usual," she said. "What did you do? Did you sleep with him to get my job back?" As soon as he said that, he regretted it, but it was already too late. "No, damn it. I made him feel good. Very good with my lips to get your job back. I slept with him because I wanted to." Furious, Jolene slammed the bedroom door. Her words hurt him more than anything in his life. He saw how angry she was, but she had no idea what kind of rage she had caused. Rayburn spent the night in his truck. After breakfast, Rayburn waited in the parking lot of the company for the opening of the payroll office. The wait was hard because he had too much time to think. He kept replaying the events of the previous night in his head, constantly dwelling on Jolene's confession or whatever it was. He watched as Benny Corbett pulled up in his black Cadillac. Who drives one of these now anyway? Finally, when he decided that everything should be ready for work, he went inside. The girl in payroll seemed reluctant to write him a check, but eventually did. He signed several termination forms related to medical and tax information before leaving. As Rayburn walked out, he breathed a sigh of relief, but it was too late. "Hey, Rayburn, what the hell's going on?" In the daylight, Benny looked even bigger and pudgier. "Didn't your wife tell you? Everything is okay. I rehired you." Rayburn waited as Benny approached him. Several workers stopped what they were doing and stared at them. "I'm sorry about all the misunderstanding, Rayburn. I'm sure everything will be fine from now on. We're all looking forward to you and your wife attending more of our parties." Benny Cordetti looked at Rayburn Watley with a big smirk on his face. And that was a mistake. Benny was a foot taller than Rayburn and outweighed him by at least 60 pounds. None of that mattered. The big man stayed on his feet longer than Rayburn expected. In the end, Rayburn felt, or rather, It seemed to him that several ribs had given way. This caused Benny to get down on one knee. The steel-toed boot quickly smashed into the kneecap in front, and he collapsed to the ground. The next target was Benny's vulnerable tool, and when he rolled onto his back to defend himself, Rayburn quickly pinned him to the ground. From that moment on, Benny's face was unprotected. One accidental blow hit him in the collarbone. A sudden pain in Rayburn's right arm forced him to switch to his left. By the time several workers dragged Rayburn away, Corbett's face had turned into a prefabricated hodgepodge. Two of them ended up on the ground, but they all let him go as he headed for his truck. Some of the men were helping Cordetti, but most were watching Rayburn in surprise. None of them had ever seen such a sight before. Brian and Tyson were playing in the side yard when he got home. Rayburn opened the door and whistled. In no time, the two boys were in the truck. Rayburn watched in the rearview mirror as Jolene stood on the back porch yelling and waving her arms. Tough luck. An hour later, they were heading south on Interstate 81. The boys were excited for lunch at Mickey D's but began to inquire about their mother. Rayburn attempted to divert their attention by discussing the fun times they would have at Aunt Nadine's. Rayburn made a quick stop to visit Nadine, who promptly directed him to Fletcher's place. Fletcher had recently tied the knot and moved into a house twice the size he needed to please his new bride. She had a 4-year-old son from a previous marriage, so that arrangement seemed to fit well. Fletcher and Grayson were working in Arlington. They typically departed on Monday mornings and returned on Friday nights. Though not the ideal arrangement, it provided steady employment. Nadine and Fletcher's wife, Garnet, often spent evenings with Rayburn. With plenty of free time, Nadine planned to travel to Pennsylvania to collect all the boys' clothes and toys. Rayburn chuckled at her swift volunteering. He believed Nadine could handle Jolene effortlessly. She was tough as nails. Rayburn couldn't fathom how Nadine managed to get a husband. He speculated she either intimidated him into marriage or he couldn't escape due to a disability. Nadine didn't find his remarks amusing. She insisted Roger married her for her looks and charming personality, often bursting into laughter at her own jest. She departed at dawn and reached the house by midday. "Who on earth are you?" Jolene was still in her nightclothes, her tear-stained face evident. "I hate to admit it, but in this scenario it's true. I'm your worst nightmare." "Oh, great. What now?" "I can't handle much more of this," Nadine observed as Jolene slowly made her way into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa. "I'm Nadine, Rayburn's older sister. I won't harm you, but I won't tolerate any nonsense either. Do you understand?" "No, I don't understand. You're in my house and you're not the boss of me. As long as you're under my roof, I'll do and say whatever I damn well please. I don't care if you like it or not." Suddenly, Nadine understood why Rayburn had chosen to marry this woman. Despite her Barbie doll appearance, she had courage. What puzzled Nadine was why she and Rayburn hadn't fought tooth and nail over the past 6 years. If any other woman had spoken to Rayburn in that manner, he would have swiftly put her in her place, regardless of gender. Yet it seemed Rayburn had never attempted to assert dominance over this woman. "Jolene, do we have anything for lunch? I skipped breakfast today." "Sure, come into the kitchen. I can whip something up quickly." "Would you like coffee?" "I'd prefer a Coke if you have one." There was silence between the two women for a moment. Nadine sat while Jolene served, and then joined her at the table. "Where on earth is my husband? Why are you concerned?" "He's my spouse, and he's with our children." "Where are they?" "With your spouse. They're safe and enjoying themselves." "Where? Damn it! This is my residence. Stop playing childish word games with me." "They're at home in Rockingham County." "Why?" "Because if he stayed, he might harm you." "Why on earth would he want to harm me?" "Because you were unfaithful to him. That's something no Watley man will tolerate. Frankly, I can't fathom why you're here now." "Oh, crap. I realized I messed up the moment I said that. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Do you want to elaborate on that?" Do you want another Coke? No, but I'll have some coffee now. Jolene pours 2 cups of coffee. Nadine declined the cream. When I returned from that terrible party, I informed Rayburn that his boss had changed his mind and he was still at his job. When Rayburn made a sarcastic comment about me sleeping with his boss to get him back to work, I lost my temper. I was furious. The thought that he might have had such an idea was unbearable to me. So I replied with a sarcastic remark. That's what got me in trouble. What the hell did you say? I told him that I made his boss feel good to get him back to his job, and that I slept with his boss because I wanted to. Nadine took a sip of hot coffee. Wow. I'm surprised you're even still alive after all this. You must really not understand anything, because that was the stupidest thing a woman has ever said to Rayburn Waitley. Really stupid. Do you even understand what you said to your husband? Jolene remained silent. What initially led to Rayburn's dismissal? I was acting like a college student at a fraternity party all night. I could feel Rayburn getting more and more dissatisfied with me, but I was enjoying myself too much to stop. The situation escalated when I danced with Rayburn's boss, Mr. Cardetti, and the situation got out of control. Cardetti put both hands on my watermelons. I warned him to take them off immediately, otherwise I would hit him so hard on the instrument that he would not be able to walk for a week. I didn't want to make a scene, but it was too late. Suddenly, Rayburn hurled a beer bottle at Cardetti, hitting him in the shoulder from behind. I think he intended to hit him on the head. That sounds like my brother. Following a sequence of events, Cardetti impulsively terminated Rayburn out of anger. Rayburn left abruptly while tensions were still high. I conversed with Mr. Cardetti for approximately 10 minutes, during which he acknowledged his rash decision and recognized Rayburn's justification. He expressed regret and assured me that Rayburn could retain his position. Additionally, he asked me to convey his apology to Rayburn, though I never had the opportunity. So, you never had any intimate involvement with Cardetti? Absolutely not. I would never entertain the idea of betraying Rayburn. Why did you claim otherwise? I was furious. He accused me of promiscuity, and I refused to tolerate such disrespect even from him. Before I knew it, I was spouting off without restraint, and there was no way to retract it. Ultimately, I was the one who suffered the consequences. I brought it upon myself, with my own words. Jolene cleared the empty cups, her eyes appearing moist, perhaps with tears. What's your next move? I'm clueless. Any ideas? You seem way more informed about Rayburn than I am. Did you know he's wanted by the law in 2 states? What? No clue. What's he done? Come on, that's a dumb question. What did he do to Benny Cardetti yesterday morning? Oh no. Cardetti won't be out of the hospital for weeks. That's our beloved Rayburn for you. Both women sat silently for a moment. He can't come back here, can he? Nope. He can't stay there either? Exactly. So what the heck do we do? What do you mean, we? You're not exactly on Rayburn's good side right now. Oh crap, he doesn't know the truth. There's no way he could know what really happened. Damn, I'm screwed again. Jolene, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I enjoyed our lunch and conversation, but I need to grab the kids' things and hit the road. Can I tag along? No way. Are you trying to put me in danger? Can I have your phone number? I can give you that, but I won't take sides. Rayburn's my brother. Family comes first. We've got some savings in the bank for a house. Does Rayburn need money? I can withdraw it for him. He's good. He's with his family, doesn't need anything. Hang on to that money. You might need it. 2 hours later, Nadine was driving south. She'd be home in time for dinner. That evening, there was a significant gathering of family. Nadine relayed to Rayburn what Jolene had told her, but he remained skeptical. He chose to believe Jolene's initial outburst until proven otherwise. The narrative she shared with Nadine appeared fabricated as a cover-up. Rayburn faced the dilemma of his next steps. Remaining where he was seemed risky, yet returning to Pennsylvania wasn't an option. Fortunately, Fletcher knew someone who owned a company constructing upscale log cabins in Winchester, Tennessee. With a brief phone call, one problem was resolved. Garnett agreed to care for Brian and Tyson until Rayburn found a permanent residence. Nadine planned to assist Rayburn in settling in and finding child care while he worked. Rayburn intended to depart on Monday morning, allowing for a weekend with his family. Despite Rayburn's efforts to return home discreetly, his presence didn't go unnoticed. Someone recognized him and news spread quickly. While the authorities remained unaware, others became intrigued. Rayburn Whatley had achieved legendary status in the region. Anyone aspiring to be seen as tough knew they could earn a reputation by taking him down. It mirrored the dime Western novels where young gunslingers challenged seasoned veterans, except this time without any six-shooters involved. To exacerbate matters, Jolene Whatley had been driving all day to locate her husband and set him straight. The longer she drove, the angrier she became. By the time she reached Rockingham County, she was seething with rage. The Whatley family had settled in with plenty of cold beer and 2 grills full of ribs and burgers. Their plan was to keep a low profile and enjoy the weekend. Everything was going smoothly until the first phone call came in. Fletcher fielded the phone call with laughter evident in his demeanor as he hung up, immediately capturing everyone's attention. "What's so amusing, Fletch?" Nadine was the first to inquire. He chuckled before responding. "Danny over at the grist mill bar just told me about a fiery blonde who stormed in, demanding to know where she could find Rayburn Whatley. Seems she's hitting up all the bars in search of her husband, making quite the scene. Danny reckons she's deliberately being a nuisance, just to provoke you." "Nadine, does that sound like something my wife would do?" Unable to contain her amusement, Nadine replied, "Absolutely. She's not giving up until she tracks you down. I'd say she's head over heels, Rayburn." "I'd say she's lost her mind. You know, once the law catches wind of this, we're in for trouble." The mood around the table was mixed, with most finding humor in the situation, until the next phone call came in. They all observed Fletcher until he finished speaking, then waited for him to disclose the situation. "Rayburn, do you recall a fellow named R.B. Griffith from Page County?" "Yeah, a tough guy who lived just east of Luray." "Well, my dear friend, he's also seeking you out, and it seems that tonight your wife and R.B. Griffith are likely to cross paths." The room fell silent momentarily. Rayburn eventually rose from his seat and rested his elongated neck on the table. "Please, excuse me for a few minutes while I go find my beloved wife." Fletcher and Grayson were reluctant to miss any developments, but Rayburn gestured for them to stay put. However, he did indicate that he wanted Nadine to accompany him. He noticed Jolene's car parked outside the Wet Willie. Parking at the back, he and Nadine entered through a side entrance. Despite the fact that Saturday night at the country bar was lively, the atmosphere was surprisingly calm, except for a heated exchange between 2 people on the dance floor. Jolene and R.B. Griffith got into an altercation standing a few inches apart. R.B., being bigger, had to duck to match Jolene's height. Its massiveness could be both an advantage and a disadvantage, depending on the point of view. Rayburn and Nadine moved closer, joining the crowd fixated on the unfolding drama. "If you touch my husband, you worthless imitation of a man, I will make sure that you regret it," Jolene threatened, and her voice cut through the silence. Rayburn couldn't help but grin to himself. They didn't even have a dog. "When I'm done with your skinny husband, I'll come back and show you what a real man looks like," R.B. retorted, his tone full of arrogance. It was reminiscent of 2 children on a playground, going at each other for more than a minute. Jolene showed no fear towards the jerk, but the confrontation would have to come to an end eventually. Rayburn edged closer, and Nadine stuck by his side. Rayburn leaned in toward Jolene, a smirk on his face as he whispered something to her. That was a big mistake. Jolene retaliated with a headbutt, just enough force to make him turn his head, shut his eyes, and pinch the bridge of his nose. It wasn't painful, but definitely irritating and humiliating. As he opened his eyes, he reached out, aiming for Jolene's blouse, only to realize a moment later that he had grabbed Rayburn's shirt instead. His surprised expression quickly turned into a satisfied grin. The second headbutt packed a much harder punch than the first one. R.B. Griffiths dropped to one knee. The air was filled with tense expectation of the first decisive blow. The grin disappeared, replaced by a scarlet stream of red liquid. Naen pulled Jolene aside just as Rayburn placed his steel-toed boot squarely on R.B.'s left knee, unleashing a relentless barrage of punches. The scuffle lasted less than a minute. He stopped the attack only when he heard that the sheriff had arrived. Rayburn slipped out through a side exit while the officers entered from the front, taking advantage of the chaos to avoid capture. Naen brought Jolene back to her place, but they took a circuitous route. Uncertain of Rayburn's intentions, Naen opted not to rush him. By the time they arrived, Rayburn had gathered his belongings and was en route to Tennessee, leaving Jolene incensed. Naen found the situation hilariously absurd. It took Jolene a couple of weeks to realize Rayburn wasn't returning. After a few more weeks, she had a rough idea of his whereabouts. One morning, she vanished. Naen promptly called Rayburn, warning him of her imminent arrival and foul mood. Jolene had left the boys with Fletcher and Garnet when she departed. Rayburn and Grayson tried to keep a low profile during their stay in Winchester, not becoming recluses but toning down their activities. Naen arrived a couple of days after her call, seeking information about Jolene at local clubs and honky-tonks. It had been weeks since Jolene's departure, and there was no sign of her. "I've located her," Naen announced, visibly pleased with herself. "Care to fill us in?" Rayburn's tone held more irritation than excitement. "She's staying at a trailer park near Belvedere with a biker named Osman. They seem quite close. She's openly searching for you, mentioning it freely. They frequent a bar called the Monkey Barn. Osman works as a trainer at a muscle gym in downtown Winchester. He fancies himself a tough guy and a biker, though he's not officially affiliated." "That's helpful, but what's my next move?" "Brother, you'll have to confront her eventually. Might as well be now," Grayson declared, placing 3 beers on the table. Rayburn, Grayson, and Naen sat off to the side. The Monkey Barn wasn't very spacious, but it had a decent crowd. They weren't attempting to conceal themselves, and it seemed to be working. Jolene arrived with a large man who had to be Osman. He was imposing and well-built, no beer belly in sight. Jolene was all over him, which irritated Rayburn. After 10 minutes, she finally noticed Rayburn, and her focus shifted back to Osman. Now aware of Rayburn's presence, she seemed to be intentionally aggravating him, and it was effective. Jolene stopped at the bar and grabbed 3 beers, while Osman stood across the room watching her approach. "Well, if it isn't my husband and his loving family. Surprised to find you here," she remarked, placing a beer in front of each of them. "What do you want, Jolene? Why do you insist on following me when you know I don't want you?" Rayburn questioned. "You know exactly what I want. I'm your wife. I want us back together. You, me, and the kids." "That's what I want," Jolene asserted. "If that were true, then why are you with that wannabe biker over there?" Rayburn countered. "He's not a wannabe. He's a real man. I needed a place to stay while I was looking for you, and he had a room available," Jolene defended. "And I assume you're sharing his bed?" Rayburn asked pointedly. "That's none of your business. If you were doing your job as a husband, none of this would be necessary," Jolene shot back. For a brief moment, silence enveloped the room. "Naen, how are my children? Is Garnet still looking after them?" No reply came. Growing increasingly frustrated, she returned to her companion. A lull ensued. They resolved to finish their beers and depart, having seen all they desired. That's when everything went downhill. Upon rising from their seats, Rayburn appeared to lose his balance. He seemed disoriented, struggling to walk or stand properly. Nadine and Grayson didn't notice initially. Though he remained mobile, he wasn't himself. They didn't even reach the door before Osman accidentally collided with Rayburn. Suddenly, Rayburn found himself under attack. Nadine and Grayson were bewildered. This was unprecedented. Rayburn never engaged in fights. Osman relentlessly assaulted him until he collapsed, then proceeded to kick him. Eventually, Nadine intervened to shield her brother. Amidst the chaos, Nadine glimpsed Jolene smirking. She and Osman swiftly exited. Grayson demanded a thorough toxicology screening for his brother at the hospital. It was evident he had been drugged, prompting immediate police involvement. The injuries were severe, requiring Rayburn to stay in the hospital for 5 days. However, Osman and Jolene eluded the authorities. Rayburn and Nadine returned to West Virginia for his recovery. Strangely, local law enforcement on both sides of the state border didn't pursue him. Exercise had never been a part of Rayburn's lifestyle. His lean physique, devoid of body fat, was a result of natural genetics and hard work. However, circumstances had changed. Nadine quickly realized that both therapy and physical activity were crucial for Rayburn's recovery, and she ensured he received both. Fortunately, there were no major setbacks. After several months, he returned to his normal, if not improved, state. Just as he was ready to head back to Winchester, they received a call. "Grayson, what's happening, brother?" "Just a little piece of news I thought you might want to know. It appears Osman and your wife left for Sturgis this morning. They're traveling on his motorcycle, so it should take about 3 days." "Were they still in Winchester?" "No. After the incident at the monkey barn, they relocated to Chattanooga. That's why we couldn't locate them. He was boasting to some old acquaintances here in town, and that's how I found out about their trip." "What on earth was he boasting about?" "The fight. He's boasting that he's the only one who managed to defeat Rayburn Watley." "That's awful." "It's even worse. He's also saying he had an affair with your wife." Nadine interjected at that moment. "I'll have the truck packed and ready in an hour. Rayburn, take the boys to Garnett's, and be back here in 10 minutes, no longer. We've got a long journey ahead of us." It took them a full 24 hours to traverse the 1,600 miles. Nadine managed to secure lodging in Deadwood, which sufficed for their purposes. Competing with 500,000 people was futile. The majority of the initial day was devoted to rest and replenishing their energy. They were clueless about where to begin their search or how to proceed. Due to most of the town being inaccessible to anything but motorcycles, they found themselves walking to nearly every destination. While Nadine found it somewhat enjoyable, Rayburn was simply aggravated. They devoted 10 hours to searching on the first day with no success. The second day didn't start any better. They opted to separate and stay connected via their cell phones. It was around 4 in the afternoon when he located Osman. He and Jolene were deeply immersed in revelry with a rowdy group in the midst of a bustling beer hall. He phoned Nadine and disclosed his whereabouts. Rayburn observed his wife and her new companion for about 10 minutes, then gradually maneuvered through the crowd. Initiating anything indoors would be swiftly halted. He needed to confront him outside, where there might be a chance. He approached within 10 feet of their table when Jolene spotted him. "Oh no." Their fellow tablemates all turned to look at her exclamation. Rayburn wasn't imposing or menacing, but he did capture everyone's attention. Osman clumsily knocked over his chair in an attempt to stand. He began pushing and shoving through the crowd toward the exit, a distance of at least 30 feet. Jolene hunched down, attempting to blend in, but it was futile. Rayburn followed but didn't hurry. Osman glanced back once more before rushing out the door. Unaware of the blaring siren or screeching brakes of the EMT vehicle, he was struck. Ambulances and fire trucks were the only exceptions to traffic rules. Nadine arrived just in time to witness the collision. With the scene now chaotic, Jolene quickly found herself kneeling beside her companion. While EMT personnel tended to the situation, she scanned the crowd for Rayburn. It was then that she noticed Nadine beside her. Faced with a decision amidst the confusion, she slipped away through the throng. Nadine trailed after her as she vanished into the RV bus parking area. Osmond took a direct hit from the EMT vehicle, resulting in 2 broken legs. Rayburn observed silently as the EMT team loaded Osmond into the back of the vehicle alongside their other patient, marveling at how they managed to fit 2 stretchers inside. Despite the lengthy journey here, he hadn't even fired a shot. 10 minutes later, Nadine returned. "Did you lose her?" he asked. "Nope," she replied. "Are you going to fill me in?" "Not until I have a cold beer," she said with a giggle, a behavior quite unusual for Nadine. As they entered the beer tent, Rayburn learned what had happened. "Your wife was darting around the parking area, trying to hitch a ride in one of the vehicles. Eventually, she found a couple of guys who agreed to let her hide in their bus. I waved at one of them, and he came over with a grin on his face. But it wasn't quite what he expected. My Spanish is terrible, but I ended up giving him $800 to take Jolene with them when they left," Nadine explained, downing half of her long-necked beer in one go. "Where were they headed?" Rayburn inquired. "Don't know, didn't ask. But the bus had a logo that said Diablos de Juarez," Nadine replied, prompting a chuckle from both of them. "By the way, you owe me $800. Upon our return, we found a large red Freightliner parked outside the motel. Nadine had kept Roger informed of our whereabouts but hadn't anticipated his arrival. Leaving them to use the room, I ventured to the Deadwood Legends Steakhouse. Opting for a substantial ribeye, I struggled to finish it. Upon my return, my sister and her husband still occupied the room, prompting me to settle into the pickup for some rest. He appeared unfazed by her presence. A light tap on the truck window roused me from my nap. Assuming Nadine and Roger had finished, I was surprised to find a young woman dressed in a wannabe biker style. "I'm not interested. Head to the truck stop about a quarter-mile down the road. I'm not a prostitute, damn it. I just need to ask you something." I may have angered her. "What is it?" "I noticed your truck has Virginia plates. Are you headed back there?" "Yeah." "I need a ride to Harrisonburg." I grumbled a bit as I exited the truck and motioned towards the motel dining room, setting off with purpose. She grabbed her backpack and trailed behind. "Want some coffee?" I received a nod in response. Nothing more. As the waitress approached, she leaned in and whispered, "Could I also get a burger?" I added a large plate of fries to the order and then introduced myself. "I'm Rayburn. What about you?" "Wanda. Wanda Stiles." "How'd you end up here, Wanda?" "One of my co-workers talked me into coming to the rally, said it'd be a blast. Well, he might be having fun, but I'm not. 2 days on the back of a Goldwing might be someone's idea of a good time, but not mine. And he didn't even bother getting us a motel room. I'm not spending another night in a damn tent. That's rough. And it gets worse. The jerk offered to pimp me out to his biker buddies. That's when I knew I had to bail." Wanda devoured the burger as if she hadn't eaten in days, tackling the fries with equal gusto. She had a sturdy build, more reminiscent of a farm girl raised on corn than anything else. Just then, Nadine and Roger entered. I proceeded with the introductions. "Oh, damn, I apologize," Wanda exclaimed. "I thought you were traveling solo." "He practically is now," Nadine retorted, signaling the waitress. "Rayburn, I'm hitching a ride back with Roger, hope you don't mind." "Actually, I'm hitching regardless," she chuckled, and Roger simply grinned. Another installment in Rayburn Watley's life comes to a close. Nadine and Roger didn't return to West Virginia for another 3 weeks. The Osmond remained hospitalized in Rapid City for 4 weeks, during which his Harley vanished. Jolene went silent, and nobody heard from her again. Wanda and Rayburn's relationship improved during their journey home, particularly when they passed through Indiana, and Wanda learned his surname. Rayburn Watley remains a prominent figure in Virginia. Greta is instructing Wanda on how to prepare grits.